All right, this is N10.2 Part 2, Getting Connected, Part 2 of 2, and we're going to continue our discussion about how to get connected to our Ethernet and pick up with RSLink's classic configuration. This is part of Rockwell software and how the PC knows how to communicate with the PLC. So this is a driver, a software driver that allows the PC to talk to the and program the PLC. So we would configure this through RSLinks Classic, and we're going to talk about how to configure the driver for serial and Ethernet drivers. How to set the module properties, set the IP address. So instead of using the bootp utility, we might alternatively use RSLinks Classic. And also we'll talk about an OPC/DDE topic creation and what is that and why we would use that. So here we have a screenshot of RSLinks Classic open with RSWho. So under communication, RSWho, we see a screen very similar to what we would see if we were in Logix Designer or RSLogix 5000 when we do communications who active. We see a very similar screen, which is using RSLinks Classic under the hood to get the job done of talking to the PLC. So here we see on the left-hand side here, we see the different drivers that are open. Links gateways, DF1, Ethernet 1, and Ethernet IP 1. And then we see a lot of devices that used to be here. Most of them have a red X, meaning they're not currently connected. But we do have a MicroLogix 1400 connected at 192.168.1.10. And you can see everything else is actually on a different subnet because it's .0 something. So that's why they're not going to communicate. They're on the wrong subnet, depending on how we've set our adapter, our local adapter subnet address. Also over here we can see a picture of the processor. It's a MicroLogix 1400, so I can see I was connected to my Pinewood Derby controller. Here, if we go to communications, configure drivers, then we can see what drivers are running. These three drivers are running simultaneously. We have the serial driver running, the Ethernet driver running, and the Ethernet IP driver running. You can see over here the status is running. We can start and stop each service, and we can go and configure each service. So here in configuration, we actually have right-clicked on the DF1 driver, gone to configure the driver, and you can see here the COM port setting, the baud rate, and other parameters. Serial ports not used much anymore, except for when you consider when you get a device out of the box, how do you connect to its Ethernet port if it doesn't have the IP address and you don't know what the IP address is that it needs. So you either have to use the bootp or come in here to RSLinks Classic and use the serial driver if it has a serial port, or a USB driver if it has a USB port, to connect and assign the IP address to the Ethernet IP driver. So here we have open the Ethernet IP driver, and here is the adapter, our NIC card, and we're assigning the IP address for that NIC card here, 192.168.1.200. So everything on that subnet, 192.168.1, would communicate to the PC at .200. Another thing we can configure here under DDE/OPC, this is a DDE is dynamic data exchange. This is the way we would get data to and from a PLC into a DDE compliant application like Microsoft Excel. So in this case, we have a topic called ML1400, and it's essentially like a shortcut pointing to a particular processor of interest, in this case a Micrologix 1400. That happens to be my Pinewood Derby, and this is the way I get the timers out of the Micrologix 1400 into the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet so they can update dynamically. Next we'll talk about RSLinx Enterprise. So RSLinx Classic was how the PC talks to the PLC and how do we configure the drivers to do so. RSLinx Enterprise is how the panel view talks to the PC or the PLC. Again, this would be part of the Rockwell software suite, and part of FactoryTalk View Studio Machine Edition. So if we look in Enterprise, or rather we look in our project in FactoryTalk View Studio Machine Edition, on the left hand side our control organizer, down towards the bottom we would see RSLinx Enterprise and then communication setup. If we double click setup, we would open this parameter box, and here's how we can configure a shortcut. We would add a shortcut here, and we would browse to the processor of interest over here, the PLC processor of interest. So there are two tabs here, the design and the runtime, or the design and local, which defines how does the computer talk to the PLC, the Logix 5000 controller, Compact Logix or Control Logix, and the runtime or target is how does the panel view talk to the PLC. Those might be two separate paths, or they could be the same path. Typically they're the same path in a simple system like we have in the lab, and therefore you can, once you have set the design path, you can copy that to the runtime path here with this button, which is now circled here. Here the shortcut's been created. It's PVP underscore quick underscore start underscore controller, which I submit is a little long for a shortcut name. In lab we just use PLC as our shortcut name. That tag name would be the beginning then, or shortcut name rather, would be the beginning of every tag name. It would be PLC something, where the PLC is the shortcut defining how do I find the processor, and here we can see the processor that it's pointing to. So that's the end of part 2 video, getting connected. Our next video will be N10.3 on network verification, and we'll cover some more network terms.